On the 3rd of May 2018, during Trump's first term, China and the United States began the first round of trade talks. In the nearly 2 years that followed, the team led by then Vice Premier Liu, he went through more than 20 phone calls and won 3 rounds of negotiations. The two countries finally signed the Phase 1 trade agreement, and this hard-won agreement was seen by many people as the Treaty of Shimonoseki, while Liu He was also cursed as Li Hongzhang of the new era. Xi Jinping overturned this agreement at the final stage, dragged it out until Trump left office, and never carried out the purchase obligations. And this negotiation also became the turning point in the relationship between Xi Jinping and Liu He. 7 years later today, China has once again encountered Trump returning to power, aggressively raising tariffs on China to 145% and declaring that he would not compromise at all. All circles did not have much hope for the first China-US negotiation. Yet to everyone's surprise, this negotiation turned out to be very smooth. In just 2 days, China and the United States agreed to temporarily and substantially cut reciprocal tariffs for 90 days, lowering them from the original 125% to 145% down to 10% to 30%. Many people regard this result as a victory for the Chinese delegation. How was that achieved? People began to re-examine the head of the Chinese delegation, the Hakka man, He Lifeng, who for the first time stood at the center of the world stage. Before that, people only paid attention to his close relationship with Xi Jinping, viewing him as Xi Jinping's favorite and appendage, and rarely paid attention to his capabilities. Now we have reason to dissect him as an independent individual. He Lifeng's ancestral home is Xingning, Guangdong. He was born in Longyan City on the border between Guangdong and Fujian, and he comes from the same county-level city as Zhang Yiming of Douyin. The hometown of Liu Xiaotao, who has just been promoted to Deputy Party Secretary of Jiangsu Province, is only tens of kilometres away from He Lifeng's ancestral home. Born in 1955, He Lifeng is 2 years younger than Xi Jinping, and he also caught up with those years of being sent down to the countryside. In 1978, He Lifeng was admitted to Xiamen University's program in Public Finance and Finance, studying under the Grandmaster of Fiscal Studies Deng Ziji. Deng Ziji was a leading figure in China's fiscal academic circles, a representative figure of the state distribution theory, and he loved to support and promote students. He was known as the Smiling Maitreya. Being able to get into Xiamen University in that era suggests that He Lifeng's academic foundation should have been quite solid. In 1984, Wang Yishi, then Vice Governor of Fujian Province in charge of the Xiamen Special Economic Zone, specifically asked Mr. Deng Ziji to recommend a student to work in Xiamen. Deng Ziji recommended He Lifeng, who was about to graduate. As a recruited talent, He Lifeng entered the Economic Research Institute of the Xiamen Special Economic Zone to work, and soon was transferred to the Municipal Government Office. In 1985, he became Deputy Director of the Municipal Government Office at Deputy Division level. In 1985, Xiamen welcomed a young Vice Mayor, surnamed Xi, given name Jinping. The day Xi Jinping arrived in Xiamen happened to be his 32nd birthday. He, Lifeng, who was responsible for receiving him, specifically asked the kitchen to add stir-fried Myeongjian noodles to replace longevity noodles, also in accordance with Xiamen customs, giving comrade Xi Jinping a birthday. Not long after, Xi Jinping was promoted again to Executive Vice Mayor, in charge of areas such as finance and special zone development. Mayor Little Xi had just arrived, unfamiliar with people and place, before a formal secretary took office. The city arranged for He Lifeng to provide counterpart support for his work, effectively acting as his first secretary. The two single men were close in age and similar in hobbies. Both liked smoking and drinking, talked about beautiful women, and were together almost all day and night. They quickly became sworn buddies. However, Xi Jinping soon welcomed the second marriage of his life, and quietly held a small wedding in Xiamen with Peng Liyuan, who was already nationally famous at the time. And this so-called wedding was simply a meal at the Xiamen Hotel. The organizer of the wedding was He Lifeng. He was so busy handling follow-up matters that he did not attend the wedding prank in the bridal chamber. After the marriage, Peng Liyuan returned to Beijing. Xi Jinping still lived in the party committee dormitory, and in his spare time he still hung out with He Lifeng. At this time, Xi Jinping already had a secretary, but in daily life he was still taken care of by He Lifeng. A few months later, Xi Jinping proposed to the municipal leadership that He Lifeng should be matched to his professional specialty. Thus, He Lifeng was transferred from Deputy Director of the Municipal Party Committee Office to Deputy Director of the Municipal Finance Bureau, and 2 years later he was promoted to Director. During his time at the Municipal Finance Bureau, He Lifeng improved the township fiscal budget management system, established sub-district finance offices, and improved the state-owned enterprise contract management responsibility system. Although Xi Jinping transferred to Ningde in 1988, He Lifeng was still a key cadre being cultivated locally in Xiamen. After serving as a district party secretary for 2 years, he was promoted to vice mayor of Xiamen in charge of Xiangshan bonded zone and foreign trade and economic cooperation. As Xiamen was successively designated a sub-provincial level city and a separately planned city, He Lifeng's administrative rank also rose accordingly, becoming a department-level Zhangting cadre. In 1995, he Lifeng he best political environment of his Fujian period. At that time, Jia Qinglin was already party secretary of Fujian province, and Xi Jinping had been promoted to deputy party secretary of the province. With Xi Jinping's recommendation, He Lifeng became mayor of Quanzhou and 3 years later became party secretary of the city. During his tenure, Quanzhou underwent its period of greatest change. He personally took command and, from nothing, established the Quanzhou Economic Development Zone, invested huge sums to build infrastructure, especially bridges, greatly improving transportation conditions and the city's appearance. Local people still remember his contributions with gratitude to this day. In 2000, Xi Jinping was already governor of Fujian province. On Xi Jinping's recommendation, He Lifeng became party secretary of Fuzhou, and in the second year he became a member of the provincial party standing committee. During this period, the Yuanhua case had just broken out and many officials fell. He Lifeng also became somewhat cautious and restrained. The famous gang-related Chen Kai case also erupted locally. Although he continued to push hard on infrastructure, Fuzhou's GDP remained stagnant. During this period, more than 30,000 farmers in Fuzhou and Fuan, dissatisfied with corruption in the process of land transfers, jointly demanded the removal of corrupt officials, and He Lifeng was also on their recall list. In 2005, Xi Jinping's political rival Liu Zhangong became party secretary of Fujian province, and He Lifeng was moved to Xiamen to serve as party secretary. During his time in Xiamen, He Lifeng expanded the city's scale and advanced the integrated comprehensive treatment and construction project around the Eastern Sea area, known as the largest key project in Xiamen's history. He also built the first fully elevated BRT line and successfully hosted the 7th International Horticultural Exposition. During this period, Xiamen also saw large-scale marches and protests against the PX project, becoming a hot event of that year. But overall, Xiamen's development in that period was still commendable. In 2009, because Liu Zhangong had remained party secretary in Fujian, He Lifeng, an ironclad Xi Jinping loyalist, had no better room for advancement. At that time, Zhang Gaoli was governing Tianjin and vigorously promoting the construction of the Binhai New Area, urgently needing talent. Zhang Gaoli was from Quanzhou and also an alumnus of Xiamen University. He was also a political ally of Xi Jinping and relatively familiar with He Lifeng, so he proposed transferring He Lifeng to Tianjin. At a meeting of the Standing Committee of the CCP Central Committee, someone raised the question, He Lifeng and Zhang Gaoli are alumni, would they form a small clique locally? Jia Qinglin said, if it can promote Tianjin's development, then even if it means forming a small clique, what's wrong with that? Thus, He Lifeng was transferred to become Deputy Party Secretary of Tianjin and the top leader of the Binhai New Area. Some media reported that after taking office, he lived in the Administrative Committee building, often holding work meetings around 9 p.m. that ran late into the night. He said publicly that it is rare in a person's lifetime to encounter an opportunity like developing the Binhai New Area, and there is no reason not to do it well. During his tenure, he promoted the 10 major reforms and the 10 major campaigns in the Binhai New Area. From 2009 to 2011, the average economic growth rate of the Binhai New Area exceeded 23%. At that time, no one could imagine the future decadence and decline of the Binhai New Area. Xi Jinping and Zhang Gaoli originally hoped that He Lifeng could take over as Tianjin mayor in the leadership transition around the 18th Party Congress. However, the then head of the organisation department, Li Yuanchao, resisted this idea, Xi Jinping was busy keeping a low profile and playing the grandson and could not do much more. He Lifeng could only rely on himself in order to first resolve the ministerial level. In January 2013, He Lifeng was elected chairman of the Tianjin Municipal CPPCC. Around the 18th Party Congress, Zhang Gaoli was elected a member of the CCP Politburo Standing Committee and Executive Vice Premier of the State Council in charge of NDRC-related work. In Tianjin, seeing no hope in the short term, He Lifeng considered switching tracks. Meanwhile, Xi Jinping's team also needed someone to take a position in macroeconomic management. Thus, He Lifeng was transferred to the National Development and Reform Commission as a vice chairman in charge of regional coordinated development, overseeing the Department of Regional Economy, the Department of Western Development, and the Department for Revitalising Old Industrial Bases such as the Northeast. In 2017, Xi Jinping was already firmly in power, and He Lifeng smoothly succeeded as chairman of the NDRC, surpassing Ning Jize, who had been recommended by Li Keqiang. To raise his political status, Xi Jinping arranged for him the title of vice chairman of the CPPCC. During this period, He Lifeng presided over the institutional reform of the NDRC, transferring many functions to other ministries and commissions. He changed the NDRC's approach of emphasising foreign investment, reduced meetings with foreign executives, and shifted toward emphasising close coordination with state-owned enterprises. Of course, his main task was to accompany Xi Jinping on overseas visits and inspections. As long as Xi Jinping went out among the entourage, there would certainly be He Lifeng. Some people even said that the time He Lifeng spent accompanying Xi Jinping had already exceeded that of Peng Liyuan as the NDRC chairman, the most important member of the State Council cabinet. He was actually accompanying the General Secretary of the Party Central Committee at all times. At the 20th Party Congress in 2022, the 7-year-old He Lifeng was elected a member of the CCP Politburo, and in the following year he was appointed Vice Premier of the State Council, overseeing finance, natural resources, housing and urban-rural development, transportation, commerce, and other fields. After becoming Vice Premier of the State Council, He Lifeng also succeeded Liu He as China's lead official on China-US economic and trade affairs, directly responsible for responding to China-US trade disputes and other issues. In 2023, He Lifeng began concurrently serving as Director of the Office of the Central Financial and Economic Affairs Commission, Director of the Office of the Central Financial Commission, and Secretary of the Central Financial Work Commission. Looking back at He Lifeng's political career, we can see, first, among Xi Jinping's early core team, He Lifeng had the highest original academic credentials, and he was also the only one who systematically studied economics and fiscal science under a renowned master. This was the foundation that later enabled him to switch to the NDRC track and take over from Liu He. By comparison, Xi Jinping's other core people were either worker, peasant, soldier students or graduates of some unknown university. Of course, this has absolutely no intention of academic discrimination. Second, He Lifeng's relationship with Xi Jinping is relatively unique. One could say he is the person Xi Jinping least wants to leave. Among Xi Jinping's close friends, Wang Qishan, Yu Zhengsheng, and Li Zhenshu are more like political allies. Chen Shi is a university classmate, but his hobbies are not the same as Xi Jinping's. Kai Chi, Wang Xiaohong, and others are more a relationship of trust at work. Only He Lifeng is the most aligned with Xi Jinping in temperament and hobbies, trusting each other in both work and life. The two give the sense of being in cahoots. Xi Jinping likes him from the bottom of his heart and is unwilling to be away from him even for a moment. Third, in his style of governing locally, He Lifeng liked to build infrastructure vigorously, especially liked building bridges, and he counts as a cadre who rather likes to get things done, but his luck was not very good. Wherever he went, he seemed to run into mass incidents. In Fuzhou, he encountered protests by more than 30,000 farmers. In Xiamen, he encountered large-scale marches against the PX project. And just after he left Tianjin, the Tianjin port mega explosion occurred. If it were another official, their career might have ended long ago. Fourth, among Xi Jinping's confidants, He Lifeng's career path had the highest correlation with Xi Jinping, and he was also the one most frequently blocked by Xi Jinping's political enemies. After Xi Jinping left Fujian, he was suppressed by Xi Jinping's political enemy Liu Zhangong. in Tianjin. When he wanted to take over as mayor, he was again sniped. Cai Qi and Huang Kunming left Zhejiang earlier and escaped this cycle. Only Wang Xiaohong stayed in Fujian and was affected. As vice premier in charge of finance and economics, He Lifeng actually has obvious shortcomings. Unlike his predecessors Liu He, Ma Kai, and Wang Qishan, He Lifeng worked in local government for a long time after graduation and almost never participated in the formulation of national-level macroeconomic policies. His predecessors all had rich experience in long-term work on economic system reform and macro-industrial policy. Aside from his university studies, he actually has not had much hands-on experience in macroeconomic governance, only making up for it somewhat during his time at the NDRC. Because Xi Jinping's team severely lacks confidants with similar experience, He Lifeng could only be made to mount the horse even if he's a duck, forced to fill the gap. One could say He Lifeng is the vice premier for finance and economics who least understands the business. At the same time, He Lifeng is also the most powerful vice premier for finance and economics. If Liu He exerted influence through his expertise, He Lifeng mainly exerts influence through recommending personnel. NDRC chairman Zheng Shanji was his junior back then. Finance minister Lan Fouan was the junior of his university classmate Liu Kun. Both of these people came from his direct recommendation. One can say that the State Council's two most important departments are both in his hands. Wang Jiang, Executive Deputy Director of the Central Financial Office, and Shen Danyang, Director of the State Council Research Office, are both his fellow junior schoolmates. The Taiwan Affairs Office is also within his sphere of influence. Pei Jinjia, who was once the Communist Youth League Secretary of the Xiamen Finance Bureau, has now become Minister of Veterans Affairs. His partner in Xiamen, Liu Shigui, later became Party Secretary of Hainan. His university classmate Liu Kun, after retiring as Finance Minister, was elected Chairman of the Board of the National Council for Social Security Fund. As for his fellow schoolmates, an entire batch of vice ministerial level cadres has emerged. One can say that among the State Council's personnel, apart from Xi Jinping's people, they are his people. His influence not only far exceeds the current Premier Li Qiang and Executive Vice Premier Ding Shouxiang, but has already surpassed all previous vice premiers in charge of finance and economics, becoming the second largest faction within the State Council system. At the same time, He Lifeng is also the Vice Premier for Finance and Economics who best understands politics, and he's also one of the CCP leaders who best understand politics at present. His understanding of Xi Jinping is not only in work, but also in life. In this regard, he is more comprehensive than Li Qiang and Cai Qi. Because of his inseparable relationship with Xi Jinping, his channel of communication with Xi Jinping is also extremely smooth. And in today's China, being able to be by Xi Jinping's side at any time, communicate with him at any time, and obtain Xi Jinping's complete trust, if He Lifeng were said to be second, no one would dare say first. Cai Qi can only tie for first with He Lifeng. Sometimes even Peng Liyun is not as good as the two of them. After all, some personal emotional issues cannot be told to one's wife. After all, Peng Liyuan rarely accompanies Xi Jinping on overseas visits and external inspections. After the 20th Party Congress, the difference between Politburo members and Politburo Standing Committee members may only be reflected in political status. In terms of power, it is actually not that big anymore. The size of power mainly depends on one's relationship with Xi and the specific work one oversees. From this angle, He Lifeng's power is not weaker than any Standing Committee member. As said many times before, in an autocratic society, the opportunity to accompany the top leader is the scarcest resource, and the ability to communicate with the top leader is the most important ability. Ding Shouxiang and Li Zhanshu can follow Xi Jinping closely because of their positions, while He Lifeng can follow Xi Jinping closely because Xi Jinping needs him. Many people believe that the relationship between He Lifeng and Li Qiang is not good. In fact, this is a misunderstanding. Before entering the State Council, the two indeed did not have many opportunities to work together. But during Xi Jinping's Zhejiang period, He Lifeng already knew Li Qiang, who served as Xi Jinping's chief secretary. When Li Qiang governed Shanghai, He Lifeng served as chairman of the NDRC. The two cooperated well. Regarding Tesla's Gigafactory landing in Shanghai, without He Lifeng's strong support, Shanghai could not have been the first to break through restrictions on foreign automakers' equity caps and in the shortest time deliver on its commitments to Tesla. Shanghai also highly cooperated with the NDRC in hosting the China Brand Festival, giving ample face. Two top-level smart people know each other's position with the leader and will not easily open fire at each other. That would only result in mutual destruction. Li Qiang had originally proactively given up many powers, intending to be the least powerful premier, so he was happy to see He Lifeng recommend people. He Lifeng also knew his own limitations and would not challenge Li Qiang's position. So then, how did a vice premier who does not understand finance and economics lead a team to quickly reach a reconciliation agreement with the US? Trade representatives rapidly shifting from sword-drawn confrontation to relative peace. This is because the US team changed. Trump also changed, but America's supply chain did not change. China changed. The negotiation team changed, but Xi Jinping's temperament did not change. Regarding tariffs and trade policy, there are two teams within Trump's camp, and these two groups think completely differently about tariff policy and China-US trade. One is Trump's trade advisor, Navarro, a non-mainstream economist who believes that an unfair trade system is extracting America's interests and needs to be fundamentally changed. Therefore, he advocates high tariffs, reducing America's trade deficit and forcing manufacturing to return to the United States. During Trump's first term, Navarro experienced negotiations with China and personally witnessed how the CCP used delay as a tactic to wait for Trump to leave office and how the agreement was never carried out at all. Therefore, he has a very low level of trust in the CCP. Navarro has always engaged in policy research and served as a think tank figure without engaging in actual business or political activities. He ran in several elections and failed every time. Even so, his theories are easy for ordinary Americans to understand and accept, and they played a big role in Trump's election campaign. Therefore, this tariff fanatic served consecutive terms as Trump's tariff strategist across Trump's two presidential terms and is regarded as the key operator behind Trump's tariff policy. The other is U.S. Treasury Secretary Bessent, an investor and hedge fund manager who once served as a partner at Soros Fund Management and also founded his own macro hedge fund, an archetypal Wall Street figure. Bessent deeply understands the negative effects of high tariffs, has never supported radical tariff hikes, and has consistently tried to block Trump from imposing excessively high tariffs. Commerce Secretary Lutnick also supports his view. At the very beginning, Trump accepted Navarro's advice and prepared to launch a trade war against more than 100 countries at the same time. Because Navarro himself is just a bookish nerd, his across-the-board high tariff strategy that did not distinguish key categories quickly disrupted global expectations, quickly triggered chaos in the financial markets, and also triggered fierce criticism from people like Musk. When Navarro, as planned, was meeting someone elsewhere in the White House, Bessent and Lutnick took action. They rushed into the Oval Office to see Trump and proposed temporarily suspending reciprocal tariffs for 90 days for most countries. At that time, Navarro was not present and could not argue or oppose. In the end, the two persuaded Trump to adopt the strategy of pausing some tariffs and immediately announced the decision to stabilize the market. This greatly exceeded Navarro's expectations. From then on, the person in charge of America's tariff war became Treasury Secretary Bessent. The hawkish Navarro temporarily stepped aside, and at this moment, Trump was also no longer the same Trump as 7 years ago. In his first term, he was not accepted by America's upper circles and kept distance from both Silicon Valley and Wall Street. Now, however, Trump has established good relationships with most American business leaders and has begun to listen to their opinions. After the China-EU tariff war began, because America's supply chain could not adjust in the short term, and combined with fear of losing the Chinese market, America's major entrepreneurs lobbied Bessent and Trump through various channels, including Trump's close ally Musk. Concerns about inflation and economic recession also pushed Trump to realize the hurt the enemy 1,000, hurt yourself 800 consequences of the tariff war. Especially since the midterm elections are very important to him. Trump indeed hates the CCP, but if fighting the CCP would cause him losses, as a businessman he is still unwilling. Therefore, when the Chinese delegation made sufficient commitments, the United States was also willing to go along, declaring its own victory. From China's perspective, having been tempered by the previous China-US trade war, Xi Jinping is no longer as fearful of the United States as he was then, and after 7 years of US containment and 3 years of pandemic difficulties, China's economy instead showed a certain resilience and did not rapidly decline. Under the incitement of the propaganda apparatus, domestic citizens showed strong indignation toward what they called America's imperialist extortion, which also strengthened the confidence of Xi Jinping and the Chinese negotiation team. Within the CCP, they even made calculations and drills for a complete severance of China-US trade and proposed the theory of internal circulation to cope with the coming period of absolute hardship. In a word, the short-term costs borne by the United States would directly rebound onto Trump and his party, while the long-term impact on China would be greater, and the side effects would be borne by foreign trade industry practitioners and ordinary people. Those in power do not worry about being affected much. On the contrary, those in power can use the tariff war as an opportunity to shift the public resentment brought by the pandemic in previous years onto the United States, successfully finding a scapegoat for economic hardship. On the eve of the negotiations, He Lifeng and Wang Wentao keenly realized the inadequacy of the Ministry of Commerce's chief negotiator Wang Shouwen in terms of capability, and that his thinking was not completely aligned with theirs either, making him unable to independently take the lead in trade negotiations. The previous negotiator, Yu Jianhua, had worked for many years in China's mission to the WTO and other organizations in Geneva, going through countless negotiations and possessing rich experience. 7 years ago, when negotiations were close to collapsing under Wang Shouwen and his team, they transferred Yu Jianhua back from Geneva to rescue the situation. Later, Yu Jianhua, who became director of the General Administration of Customs, had already committed suicide and could not come to rescue the situation again. They had no choice but to find Li Chenggang, China's representative to the WTO, who had a similar background to Yu Jianhua, and let Li accept the mission at a critical moment to participate in the negotiations. Li Chenggang is a Peking University-educated legal expert who worked for many years in the Department of Treaty and Law of the Ministry of Commerce, with rich experience in WTO disputes and negotiations. As for another key negotiator, Liao Min, He Lifeng was relatively satisfied. Liao Min is also a Peking University graduate, studied in the United Kingdom, and also worked on the front line in banking. He served as secretary to Liu Mingkang, chairman of the China Banking Regulatory Commission, and is very familiar with affairs, an extremely rare talent within the CCP. After the team was built, He Lifeng, in accordance with Xi Jinping's thinking, repeatedly discussed response plans with the team, envisioned various possible scenarios and the other side's possible reactions, and made detailed reports to the General Secretary. Compared with his predecessor Liu, he's timid, shrinking before Xi Jinping. He Lifeng's communication with Xi Jinping had fewer obstacles, and he could communicate the underlying logic more directly, and at this time Xi Jinping was also more confident than a few years earlier. Following the approach of promoting peace through fighting, they not only imposed reciprocal tariffs on the United States at the first moment, but also successively terminated imports of American advantageous products such as Boeing aircraft, agricultural products, and films, and began strictly controlling exports of important strategic resources such as key rare earths, showing the United States an attitude of, "We will accompany you to the end." In order to push America to make concessions, they seized on the fentanyl issue that Trump cared about, and even specifically asked the policing czar, Minister of Public Security Wang Xiaohong, to personally step forward to cooperate in the negotiations. Mobilizing Wang Xiaohong to personally step forward might be difficult for others, but for the old leader and old buddy He Lifeng it was easy. The matter was also a major issue that the General Secretary cared about, so the Ministry of Public Security was willing to fully cooperate with the negotiations, helping He Lifeng demonstrate sincerity. Although He Lifeng is not as professionally knowledgeable as Liu, he is more familiar with China's bottom lines and more familiar with human hearts and politics. Therefore, from the very beginning, he maximized the display of China's sincerity and also revealed the determination and bottom line of the CCP top leadership. This happened to meet Besant, who also urgently hoped to ease trade relations with China, and so both sides went along with the momentum. Within 2 days, they reached a phased reconciliation agreement. Of course, for both sides, this is only a temporary delaying tactic. The United States needs time to adjust supply chains, and China needs time to continue developing sneakily. Sooner or later, the two countries will collide again, but regardless of the outcome, for the Chinese representative team that engaged with He Lifeng through this trade war, they will all have a bright future after all. They all know He Lifeng's skill at recommending people, And although He Lifeng at the 21st Party Congress will exceed the statutory age and must leave the vice premier position, Xi Jinping will certainly arrange another position for him to extend his political life. Just as Xia Baolong was put in charge of Hong Kong and Macau, just as Chen Shi still serves as president of the Central Party School. And in Xi Jinping's travel entourage, there certainly will still be He Lifeng's figure. Thank you for watching.